What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and I'm pleased to bring you a breakdown of what I think was the best full series in the Overwatch League thus far. The LA Valiant versus the London Spitfire, two teams that are definitely going to be vying in the playoffs of the Overwatch League. It went the distance, the full 5 maps, and the matchup did not disappoint. There's a lot to learn from the sick plays and the mistakes made by both teams, and we're going to get into what exactly went on here. But first, I want to make a few announcements for you. If you don't already follow us on Twitter and you watch the games live as well, be sure to head over there and give us a follow, because during the matches, I try to give my perspective on what's going on, kind of live tweet it a little bit. Try not to spam your feeds too much, but I have got a glowing review from a new friend of mine. Tabs is an old school YouTuber. I met him in LA. He says he loves the Twitterinos, so I must be doing something right. While you're watching the games, check our Twitter feed to see what I think of what's going on. Probably even more exciting for those of you who really get into this analysis stuff. I'm confident that I've got a grip on the schedule that I'm going to be able to keep to for Overwatch League VOD breakdowns, and at least I think I can do Mondays and Tuesdays. And I'll keep it recurring that it'll go live on Twitch, normally when the Overwatch League would go on, so we all can kind of keep our schedules in sync. On the Twitch live stream, I'll be able to break down games, matches, teams, narratives that are not going to be on our YouTube channel anytime soon. So, for instance, I think for this first inaugural Twitch stream, I'm going to look at the Dallas Fuel again, because I've already covered them on YouTube, but they've played more games since then. The storyline has pushed forward, and even after making that first video, I still get a lot of questions about where the Dallas Fuel are at, where they're going, how they can improve. Is all hope lost? They're 0-4. Let's find out. If you're interested in that, I'm live streaming now. As this video goes live, you can head over to our Twitch page, and I'll be breaking that down. If, of course, you're catching this as this video goes live. But if you miss it, fear not. I'm going to also put the VODs on my personal channel, which is also linked in the description as well. Okay, that's it. Enough of the preamble. Now, let's get into the series. This is a matchup that the Valiant were definitely looking to rebound after a disappointing performance against NYXL, because a lot of analysts and fans are looking to the Valiant to kind of be the hopeful Western team to try to compete against the top Koreans, because let's face it, barely anyone can. Luckily for us, Valiant definitely turned up and were able to drive this series to a best of 5. How the heck was that possible? Well, it didn't start off great. In fact, I was worried from the get-go, because it looked like Spitfire might have had a tactical advantage coming out with this defense that was clearly built to counter dive, getting a pretty hard read on Valiant, knowing that if you can stop Soon's Tracer, you pretty much win, which is what NYXL did. But immediately we see the weakness of this team comp Orisa off on her own, just a single healer. They are able to isolate her and dive her. This is what dive does. And because nobody hits a impact frag, the dive comp kind of just rolls over this. However, despite losing their main tank, they yield some ground and are able to get the Winston back. They get him to come back and contest the cart. And as long as this turret is alive, it's building massive amounts of molten core. And that's just an ultimate that is going to silence all pushes, especially if you're running a dive comp. You just can't really challenge anything when there's a turret plinking you away from afar. But despite losing that fight, they sort of hang around. It gets a little scrappy. The tanks Fate and Envy have been playing just about flawless, honestly, in the first 2 weeks of the Overwatch League. They're able to peel back, sustain their lives to get this re-engage down, which is going to disrupt this defense and force London Spitfire to change. But the problem is, if you're a Valiant supporter, you probably were more excited to see London Spitfire run a non-traditional comp, because now they're going into dive mirror, and I hate to break this to everybody, but Prophet is statistically both the best Genji and the best Tracer in the Overwatch League. I fear for any team that thinks that they can run Dive Mirror against Prophet's Genji, because he really does show the star performance that you can get out of a Genji player who's among the top in the league when there's open space to manipulate the fight. And especially after watching so much Junkertown, I forgot how skillful a dive-v-dive matchup can turn out to be on a map like Dorado. The deathmatching and raw fragging power between these two top-tier Overwatch League teams is pretty incredible, honestly. And if you're not looking careful, it can be hard to see why one team wins and the other team loses. But let's try to pick apart a few key fights that the London Spitfire got economy wins in, which ended up draining the entire time out of the Valiant's time bank, because it isn't just straight 1-for-1 that London outplayed them mechanically. It also is how they're using their resources and where they're putting their attention in the fight that's making all the difference. Okay, look here. Defensive teams that are very mechanically strong right now can get away with murder playing really aggressively into the enemy team's spawn, because as long as their tanks play well enough to sustain and you farm up resources, well, you can kind of just res aggressively, get in their face, and make it really hard for them to ever touch the cart. But of course, playing that way leads big windows of opportunity to get punished. But it's on the attacking team to close those situations out, to not just win the fight, but to get the kills that are required to get a cart wipe. Let me show you what I mean. Brawling going back and forth on the cart, Fissure gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar deep inside the enemy team's side of the map, but he knows he has Nuss's Valkyrie, so he gets rezzed instantly. And especially with dive comp on the attacking team, there really isn't a strong counter to the Valkyrie. You just have to burst targets on the ground. It's not like they have a Soldier Sights or a High Noon or something that can punish this behavior. Fissure gets out, and debatably Bird Ring makes some space here in the backline, occupying his spot, forcing the tanks to turn around to focus him. Fissure's able to get healed up on the cart. London Spitfire largely disengaged, but Bird Ring doesn't get there fast enough. He gets picked off by Envy. Okay, here's your opening. One res down, now comes the second res. You have Valkyrie, time to close out the fight. Up ahead on the street, Fate and Soon are harassing down Bedozin to force out the Transcendence, which they successfully do. Now it's time for Silk Thread to shine. But immediately as that blade comes out, the rest of the Spitfire know it's time to disperse. And though he does end up fragging Bedozin, the Zenyatta for London Spitfire, he has no other targets to slash through. Yet somehow the entire time the cart's getting stalled in this. How is this possible? Well, when you play dive comp this great, it can be impossible to kill the mobility characters, Diva, Tracer. Spitfire successfully disengage from the major damaging components of the Los Angeles Valiant's attack, and they turn a fight where they're in a resource disadvantage into a really slow loss. With their last player, Diva, we've spoken at great length at her ability to stall the payload, dying on the cart, making for all of these resources to just barely win a team fight, now get it around the corner. London Spitfire now have a chance to regroup, and the ult economy is more or less stabilized. By some miracle, Prophet is able to sneak in the crucial damage through the Transcendence. That crowd control from Fissure, I think, was the very small difference of her getting the benefit of the Transcendence healing from Unko or not. Small little boop and a sword slash takes her out of the fight, and that's going to end up being the key pickoff, because now the London Spitfire have a Mercy and the Valiant don't. This style of play, I think most players are accustomed to. I would call it like a base race, which is from StarCraft. It's when both teams are playing aggressively towards the enemy rather than fighting each other, as opposed to NYXL, which play more of a duelist play style, where say Bjolby will go off and duel the enemy Tracer, for instance. In this scenario, Prophet's allowing for his backline to fend for itself, which can be a death sentence, but because he wins the base race, gets the Mercy dead, and soon doesn't kill their Mercy fast enough, the Valiant are just going to end up with less resources by the time that the rest of this fight plays out, which is kind of the real test for the Valiant, because Soon didn't get a whole lot done in the NYXL game, because like I said, they play more of an isolation play style, putting man on man to try to deny that carry potential, whereas Spitfire are willing to allow a player like Soon to have an opportunity to go kill stuff and sort of challenge him to frag as fast as Prophet can. And because he doesn't in this case, it doesn't really matter any of these kills he's getting on the back end, because his team weren't able to survive because their Mercy was dead. And figuring out these intricate win conditions is how you really take your Overwatch game to the next level. Because London Spitfire have the respawn advantage, killing the backline is stronger for them, because they're more likely to be able to easily get someone to come stall the cart to get a respawn advantage. The value of healing is way more strong when you're at a respawn disadvantage, because you need to be able to sustain through a push. You can't rely on respawns at all, which is why I'd advocate that Soon needs to actually one-on-one Prophet in that scenario to sustain rather than go aggro. But that's a stylistic difference, and I would assume every coach sort of has their own perception on how their team should play. We'll actually see that difference in styles put on full display as we watch Prophet's Genji play, which is far more defensive, control controlling and peel focused, because what are they controlling? Well, they're controlling the cart, they're keeping their backline alive, they're sustaining the push, right? They actually split their resources here into two separate squads, more or less, where Prophet's guarding the cart and his backline. Nuss does end up dying, but keeping his Zenyatta alive is really all they need, for now at least. And I think this just kind of shows you almost where the attention and focal point of where the action is as this happens. Prophet sustaining his backline here is way more valuable than getting faster kills on the enemy's backline, because the defense has to touch the cart. So controlling the cart and sustaining his push is going to require the defense to make a play on you. And once he bursts down the tracer here, they're allowed to just control the fight wherever they want. They can just sort of challenge and say, you want to stop this cart? Come get it. Then they get forced into a situation where they have to, otherwise they're going to lose the map. Then Prophet's got the Dragon Blade by then, catches them all out. This map didn't go very well. In these complex dive-v-dive scenarios, you really need to know your win condition immediately, or else you can get punished really hard. Taking and winning a DPS duel can be like all the difference in a fight working or failing. Moving on to map 2, it's Horizon Lunar Colony. I feel like we've looked at this map a lot recently, so I'm just going to breeze past what went on here. The Valiant come out with a quad tank, which we've explained in depth. Works as you might imagine, really easy on first, near impossible on second. The high damage of Zenyatta, Junkrat, and Reaper was just too much for the quad tank to sustain through and find good ultimates. They don't end up getting much out of it, have to switch after wasting quite a lot of time, I think. At some point, I think Pro Team's just gonna swap off the quad tank to charge up better ult fight with a different comp. Unless you can roll it immediately, I don't really understand why anyone stays on it. It's not very good on second, but anyway, beyond that, the round goes really scrappy. The counter engage from the London Spitfire is a bit too strong, stalls out these pushes. Similar issues that they dealt with on Dorado creep up here. And overall, a kind of a questionable May pick out of Rascal. I know they want to put him in. He's a fan favorite. We hear Monty say that he wants to see him get playtime, but I think the Spitfire looked stronger without him, unfortunately. We've seen a lot of teams across the Overwatch League struggle to incorporate these niche hero pools into the roster, and he's somebody that I'm going to look to towards their map losses as well, because like I said, Prophet is insane, and you have to sub out Prophet to put a niche skill set into the game. I don't think you have to do that unless you're facing some of the more top-tier Korean oppositions where you have to outstrat them or you won't beat them. I think the Spitfire actually had a better chance beating them here with just the raw firepower that Prophet brings, but nevertheless, the Los Angeles Valiant showed that they're well-versed in the counter-engage. Play a fun game that I call Kill the McCree. He's the easiest dive target in the world, and whether it's him going down or Bedosan on the Zenyatta, the London Spitfire really struggled to sustain and get their backline fragged time and time again, which I can't stress how important it is. Think of it this way: if your tanks dive in and kill anything, but your healer and or range DPS just die, and you can't res them, there is no window to punish the point, because in 10 seconds, the kill you just got is coming back. It's really hard to do, but somehow you have to keep your backline alive to this defensive counter engage, or just come at the point with so much firepower that they can't challenge you, which is eventually what they're going to end up doing. Honestly, the Valiant looked like they were about to win this map. They were counter engaging better than the Spitfire were for the majority of this round, but the Spitfire take a lot of those deaths on the chin, reset after a lot of those team fights, and eventually just going into the last few seconds of a round, they just have more utility in their ultimates to be able to toss that into the fight and come out on top. Their Mercy doesn't die, so they have instant res to get Rascal back on his feet again after another death, which is really the bare minimum you can expect out of an attacking team. Unless the defense plays so well that they don't have to use their ultimates in order to defend or feel like they need to, eventually you'll grind into a spot where you just have a bit more ultimates than them and you can win that way. If we were to criticize anything, it would be this Valkyrie engage onto the high ground. It guarantees this fight, but it's ultimately what's going to allow for the window of opportunity for Spitfire to come in the last second to cap it. Kareev pops Valk in order to be able to W mouse one into this counter engage, damage amp. You need just one ult, but it's the most important ult on defense to use. I like using Valkyrie to engage. It's just if you use it this way, it's sort of respecting your opponent a bit too much. It's as if you're saying, we can't win this fight without it. Rather than waiting to utilize it in response to clutch out a fight, you use it to win a fight now and probably lose the fight next. But at the very least, drain more time off the clock. That's kind of the issue. There's no guarantee that if you don't pop it, that you'll be able to hold it all. Maybe you don't pop it and too many people die in the awkward positioning and you can't get any use out of it. They take the point and have extra time, and you're looking to lose the map. So They respect their opponent here, which at least guarantees pushing the game into overtime, which it does. The only problem is Rascal nearly charges up an entire Riptire off a first poke engagement, and it gets Fate down. It wastes so much time. The quad tank is just so slow. I don't think we've seen the Valiant try to run this comp very much. Agilities has looked sick on the Roadhog, but this comp just doesn't work if you can't keep your main tank alive. And I'm gonna have to point out Kariv's Lucio play here. I mean, first of all, Fate getting caught in the trap is like a nightmare. You gotta look out for those traps. I'm sure he was really upset once he got caught in that one. But to execute this properly, you have to make sure you pop your Lucio speed amp after the CC effects have been used, so you don't want to use it and then get sucked back by Orisa's Halt, for instance. But you gotta get around that corner really fast, and once you do and get onto the point, then you're happy as a clam. But I think Fate didn't really expect to lose half of his health and got just a little too greedy on his shield, making it this way, and that's gonna be the major mistake that's gonna win them the entire round. Just a little bit of cohesion failure on this teamwork, reliant team composition, and it falls flat on its face. It would have been better, for instance, like for Agilities to just jump out in front of the damage coming at his main tank, because no one's more important than the shield, in my opinion. If you don't have the shield, everything else loses the ranged battle harshly. And in the London Spitfire's attack, they actually go for an alternate route because they just need a tick. The Valiant reposition to contest the point, but they may have even been better to split their resources and try to put a stall character on the point while fragging out the back of this push, because getting onto a head-on engagement against it is just kind of what it wants on the point. And it happens off screen, but Soon's in the back left corner. There's no shield to be able to block for him. Fighting in a close range space, he gets bursted down, and then we really start to see how the quad tank just rules point A. The crazy thing about this fight is Agilities ends up getting a Riptire into the back line, fragging down both supports. All of the tanks are really low, but just see the value that that shield has. Once that shield's up, well, everybody's fine, because Zarya and Roadhog have a little bit of self-healing, which ends up losing this fight. I actually think if you had to choose in the quad tank, you'd prefer to lose one healer than to lose your shield, because the shield just blocks so much damage that your targets would otherwise take that a healer couldn't even outpace anyway. But after that map, we move on to Oasis. Valiant down 0-2. Backs against the wall. Lesser teams would have definitely crumbled in this situation, assuming that the Koreans are unbeatable, but the Valiant give a valiant effort. See what I did there? Strangely enough, the Spitfire keep Rascal in on control, which normally you want to put in your best mechanical DPS players, even if they have smaller hero pools. Rascal is a sick Pharah historically, but from the jump into this engagement, the Valiant are just hitting more shots, dealing more damage, and fragging out harder in this deathmatch game type. After the first fight, you can see Agilities has 82 on his ult, whereas Rascal is sitting at 45. It's all well and good to have a Pharah play more of a duelist playstyle, doesn't necessarily have to be the main damage dealer, but you gotta get that Pharah out of the air quickly, otherwise Agilities just helped the ground fight win much more convincingly, and the Valiant go to have a big lead going into the start of Oasis. The rest of this round goes quite sloppy for the London Spitfire, as they have really poor disengaged shot calling and just keep throwing good money after bad, dumping resources into a stall fight over and over again, just extending the fight into a prolonged deathmatch scenario that Soon just eats up, baby. He's used to that. That's where he thrives. I think Agilities continues to outpace Rascal through the fight. Spitfire don't properly regroup and engage, and it goes from bad to worse. Really good sound barrier out of Kariv sustains the fight, but overall, London just made a lot of key mistakes and didn't perform mechanically as good, letting for this one to easily go to the Valiant. And at this point, it's like, wait a second, this Korean team is human after all. Is frustration setting in? Are they trying to rush to the finish line too fast, pulling a hammy in the process? Like, they just won 2 maps, they just have to carefully win this one and they'll be fine, but really over aggressive on point 1. Okay, enough of playing against this dive comp. Round 2 was a multi-tank brawl, going back and forth, really good ult economy decisions on both sides, but ended up going down to this last fight where both teams are really trying to get value out of their tank ults and kind of failing spectacularly. Agilities ends up getting a very high non-kill hook that puts Rascal into the bottom section with his Graviton and the game on the line. So he ends up launching it from underneath, catching a bunch of the tanks, but what does grouping up quad tank do for you? I mean, that's how they want to be standing anyway. Both Reinhardts throw their Earth Shatters into each other's shields, and basically just with the positioning advantage of the multi-tank of the Valiant getting on the point, and the Spitfire having a member getting pulled off the point, forced them to kind of of disperse with a man disadvantage, well, the Spitfire have to just come fight into them, and Agility's just eats that up. Agility's Roadhog is always a joy, and something that I think the Valiant can definitely lean on. And before you know it, the momentum has shifted entirely. The Spitfire look human. The Valiant popped off with a fairly swift 2-0 on Oasis, and we're going on to Eichenwald to possibly push it to a decider 5th map. On Eichenwald, the Valiant start off on attack, and Soon looks to be really getting into his zone. I think this map, and really this series, has been the most impressive Soon has looked in the Overwatch League, because he's making some plays not against teams that are kind of falling apart and playing poorly, but against a top-level team that should know better not to let some tracer tactics walk over them. On these bigger maps, if Soon has the space to be able to use his mobility, it gets them a lot of momentum to take first and get the cart really close to second. The Spitfire's ult economy, though, and defensive positioning really made it so that it required a massive undertaking for Valiant to be able to punch through. Like, it's kind of hard to make this call. Is it worth it to go send the Dragon Blade at them to get a couple kills just to equalize with Valk? It kind of doesn't really work. Silk Thread can't really find the duels that he needs. Tracer has a bit easier of a time because she can blink so much. Genji's disengage is a little bit weaker, and Birdwing just plays too far out in the distance and uses the map to kind of hide from that engagement. And this is what I was really impressed with the Valiant. This is going to happen twice on their attacking side. They swap to like a perfect counter in the nick of time. Silk Thread goes onto the Soldier, and we never really get to see his perspective, but he's able to stay alive. The type of defense that the Spitfire have, namely with the McCree, means that they're going to have a range disadvantage and a counter engage disadvantage, because they have a character that kind of just has to pull resources towards him from his team, otherwise he's going to die. But at the same time, you're putting a Soldier at range against a McCree, which just gives the Soldier an advantage. Well, Silk Thread Soldier gave a little extra oomph on the backside without requiring him to commit like he had to do on the Genji. Soon remains untouchable to end up taking second, but all that stall, there's not a whole lot of time. They might not even end up finishing the map. Pushing the cart into third, Spitfire swap it up into Junkrat McCree, which is one of the scariest anti-dive DPS combos you can have, because all the trouble that McCree has against multiple targets, as long as Junkrat is in a favorable engagement, he kind of covers that up for him. It gives you that dynamic duo, especially when you're pushing down a tight lane like this, in order to cover each other's backs and have the lethality to really punish any type of aggression. The Valiant read this, only have like 20 seconds on the clock, by the way, so they end up mirroring the Junkrat McCree themselves, but they go for their Orisa Hog combo, which is stronger against the dive tanks. It's gonna take a lot of hits in the face against the Junkrat, but as long as they're able to get into space, which they end up doing, they barely make it to the cart on time. Probably a big mistake from the Spitfire, you'd have to say, as I've covered many times on this map, even specifically in the waning seconds. Do not let the enemy casually walk up to the payload. The Spitfire really needed to go fight them outside, put a little aggression, require some resources out of them to gain that space. Playing too defensive here behind the cart allowed for the support ults of the Valiant to find their mark. They have the better tank combo for this stage as well, I'd argue, and the Spitfire sort of just back up into a funnel engagement that they're not set up to win. They have dive tanks, which can't really head-to-head against the Orisa Hog. They have to outposition it. And even though they do end up killing the Mercy, it's really this barrier and the crowd control that ends up winning the day. Because the Spitfire have to reach so deep just to finish off the Mercy, that gets them fragged, and even though the rest of the fight's kind of even, well, the Valiant have a bunker and the enemy don't. So what are you gonna do? This barrier is gonna block anything that the defense were hoping to do, and getting it set up on the cart was just an instant win. The Spitfire's comp could not engage in that way for that to work, and maybe that's a misread of the Valiant's ults, because they did try to counter engage once it came in, but the ult sustained it, and then it's too late. Like, you needed to do that outside in order to have a chance. Waiting that long forced it into a funnel engagement on third in close range when they have a barrier, and your barrier is a, Winston bubble, which doesn't block very much. That ends up working out. Huge clutch play out of the Valiant, closing out the map when highly contested. This is really what you want to see out of some of these playoff level teams, is being able to adapt and clutch things out. And despite how this series ends up going, I think this yields to a lot of confidence in the rigidity of the Los Angeles Valiant, and kind of knocks down the London Spitfire a little bit, because they're not playing a flawless series here, and the really odd decision making is just going to continue going into their attacking round. Okay, the Valiant set up with a pharmacy defense, which is going to make coming through some of these chokes very lethal. And the Spitfire put Birdwing on the McCree this time, but I can't emphasize enough how much of a bad team comp I think this is. Every time that I've seen the attacking team read that the enemy have a pharmacy defense, I think you have to go attack pharmacy to mirror it, because exactly the problem that McCree has against Pharah at range presents itself. In order for him to take the shots and win the duel, he has to take aggressive angles that the Pharah can just hide from, and she's miles away from his effective range anyway. McCree is a sick character, don't get me wrong, but when we see players like Pine popping off on it, it's on the control maps at medium range. As soon as that Pharah gets out into long range, the McCree is worthless, and in fact, the soldier would be too. Playing a ground-based composition against the pharmacy with aerial superiority is just a massive mistake, and they stick on this comp forever, it feels like. Maybe with like a Reaper and a Lucio, I can see this comp working to rush into an area of the map that's favorable for you, but this bad engagement is like ranked matchmaking-esque, where the Spitfire just keep trying to fight out in open space, where the Pharah has a range damage advantage. It's just really silly. It ends up finally breaking because Birdring gets his Deadeye, which is his key ranged pick-off potential when it comes to the pharmacy duel. That's where he starts to look sick. Otherwise, he more or less has to avoid that battle when it's outside of his range. But the Deadeye gets the picks, finally get the opening they're looking for. It only took an insta-kill out of McCree's ultimate to make it happen, but it ended up working eventually. But only 2 minutes left on the clock. Valiant look like they have a massive potential to take this point, and all it really takes is some cart stall, which is what they go to do. All the Valiant need is some expensive fights for the Spitfire. Engage on them, force them to use resources, and then hopefully by the end, the Valiant can use their resources to win the last fight when it matters, right when the clock runs out. And that's what happens. Both teams end up with having a Valkyrie at the same time, which I think objectively favors the defense, especially since they have respawn advantage anyway. But the Spitfire have no choice. They have to win this fight now, and they already used a lot of their other tools in the previous fights, so now this leaves Silk Thread with his Genji Blade. He's able to get some frags on the back line, and the Valiant tempo them out, holding on Street's face, and we're going on to a fifth and final map. Absolutely great. I know a lot of viewers really want the Korean teams to get challenged. I don't have a problem with the Koreans being the best, but I definitely want everyone else to learn from them and improve as well. We want the most competitive league that we can, of course. So we need the Westerners and everybody else to step their game up, and the Valiant, with some iron grit, toughed it out through these two maps, and the Spitfire kind of fell flat, running some strats and doing some things that were just a bit too cocky, as if they won the series already. And before you know it, we're going on to Li Jiang for the decider. Now, unfortunately, the Valiant looked to kind of fall flat on this map, and I think it might be because maybe they're just not practiced enough on it, because you have to think, how much allocation of time are you going to give a decider map, which we've only seen a few times in the league anyway? But going back to what worked for them on the Oasis second round, triple tank with Soon on the Tracer, they start brawling it out. Agilities hits a shot, Fate lands a charge, and they convincingly win this first fight. The only problem is I think the Spitfire show some traditional Korean adaptation, and they really stop letting this comp beat them. On this next re-engage, they play their tanks a lot better. Gesture blocks a hook, nullifying a lot of Agility's impact, and even on the next hook, Fury is there on the defense matrix to save it, and this theme just kind of continues between the Zarya bubbles from Prophet and the clutch defense matrixes from Fury. Agilities, who's an insane Roadhog, is just going to see no value throughout the rest of this round, and that's going to be kind of an issue for this triple tank setup, that the Spitfire's triple tank combo is more about teamwork, whereas the Valiant relies on Agilities to carry, because if that hook doesn't get a frag, he's just less of a character than like Zarya in that slot, for instance, has a worse ultimate, a worse mid-fight, doesn't help sustaining his teammates, and that theme just sort of shows throughout the rest of this round. We've seen a lot of the fat comps coming out in this series, and I think the multi-tank meta will start to redevelop once again once Mercy is out of the spotlight as the best support, because these comps are just so effective. But at least for now, I feel pretty confident in saying that the Diva Zarya tank combo will counter the Roadhog as long as they land their abilities to deny him hook value. And that's just sort of a tough meta comp lesson that you have to learn in real time. Maybe Agility swaps to the Junkrat there and they're able to see a bit more value. It's hard to say, but we go on to the next point. I think everyone's sitting on the edge of their seats for now, really hoping that we see see the Valiant bounce back, but the spectator camera doesn't actually swap fast enough to catch these frags from Birdring. A huge risk pick, taking the Widowmaker out the gate against the Pharah on a Pharah map. This is the type of pick that your star player says, put faith in me, guys, because if Birdring doesn't hit his shots perfectly in this scenario, his team instantly loses, basically. It's like an all-in pick. But hitting shots, getting the pharmacy out of the air, made it so that they convincingly won the first fight. Agilities immediately swaps to the Genji, but Birdring is putting on a clinic. This shot is probably one of the most insane I've ever seen. How did he even see him? Incredible, burning the res before they can even get into the fight. Now, they do swap onto this control comp because I think they want to just focus on playing the objective. We saw how powerful this comp can be once you have that bunker set up on the objective. The dive tank's really going to struggle against it. But in order to make this work, they had to avoid the Widowmaker lines of sight, which they just don't do. I think they had to swap over to the Lucio. I know it would have wrecked Kariv's ult charge on the Zenyatta, but this fight was over as soon as they didn't avoid this angle, because Birdring ain't missing. He's sick of me saying Fleta's so good. He's trying to hit that #1 DPS spot, and just getting gummed up when there's a flanking line of sight from Birdring here means that this comp's going to fail miserably. Like, it has to quickly get onto the point to avoid this, and then maybe force Birdring onto the point, because if they avoided this angle, they could hide behind the pillar, as we've seen other teams do running this comp on control point. But it just goes from bad to worse. Unko tried to use the Valkyrie to save Agilities there. He dies, Agility peaks again, he dies again. I mean, it's just all over, basically. The Valiant have no ults to speak of. The Spitfire have an ult advantage, and here they actually show the Valiant a lot of respect. They don't even challenge the point. They yield it up entirely, which might seem like a bit of a risk. You might think inherently that you should require the attacking team to expend a bit more resources to get that space, but you're playing with a Widowmaker, so it's a little bit of a risk anyway. They keep the play in Birdring's hands. Hopefully he hits a shot as they are scurrying onto the point. Prophet kills Unko and pulls out the Transcendence from Kariv anyway. So the Valiant win the battle here, but the Spitfire win the war, because they backed out of that without using hardly anything, knowing that they have so much time that the objective doesn't matter. Man, I just wish I saw Western teams do this more. They yield the objective and play the ult economy, playing very defensively, and it doesn't work out as well as I think they'd like it to, but it gives Birdring an opportunity to swap off the Widowmaker, which isn't going to be as good retaking the fight. If Birdring hits a shot there, that whole thing is entirely different. Maybe they end up winning it, but even in the way they lose it, they don't feed their bodies so hard that they just give a bunch of ult charge to the enemy team. It's a really interesting play that they went for that you don't see a lot of teams do, but because I don't know if you can objectively say it put them in a better spot necessarily, but especially teams that want to run a bit more of a reserved ult economy style, I think this is what you have to emulate. You have to disengage off that last fight to make sure that you just don't overwhelmingly lose it to swing the ult economy back to the enemy team's favor. Giving up the objective is fine, losing the ult trades is not, because that can lose you the whole map. At this point, it actually looks like the game is quite even, and if played properly, you think the Valiant could have held here. The Spitfire go for an aggressive dive Valkyrie engage, giving a ton of extra damage, and just Unko gets deleted immediately from the damage amp of the Valkyrie beam. I think as soon as he saw the Spitfire launch their Valk at him, I think he had to respond with a Valk of his own to make sure that he could stay away. And because he doesn't, he gets fragged down, and that just ends the entire fight. They have a Valk running and you don't. Agilities has no idea if it's going to be useful to pop his blade here or not. And immediately, as soon as that happens, the entire control of the round just gets thrusted back into the Spitfire's hands. It's just cleanup after that, because once you have Valk on your side, you just win, which is just the way Overwatch is played right now. We all kind of want to see it a bit different, but since we might just be going back to 3 and 4 tank immediately thereafter, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But despite the harsh loss and the mistake right at the end to pretty much guarantee the round loss, I think we all can be excited for how the Overwatch League is developing. I'm sure the rest of the teams in the league will start to really grow off each other and start to challenge one another as everyone levels up through experience of playing the game. But for now, Korea still reigns supreme, but the gap is definitely closing, as we can see. Well, guys, that's been it for me. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe, because we upload each and every day, so you can want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter. Like I said, we tweet out during the Overwatch League games. Oftentimes I interact with you guys as well, so be sure to reply with your thoughts as well. And don't forget, Twitch streams on Monday and Tuesdays around when the Overwatch League normally starts. If you watch this video right when it came out, I might still be streaming a breakdown of the Dallas Fuel Week 2 matches. Okay, I've talked enough. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.